Good afternoon, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News. We've got some excellent stories lined up for you today. First of all, if you'll remember, early on in Donald Trump's administration, there was a State Department official that was caught spying for agents of a foreign government. She was a member of the Clinton State Department, and she was conspiring with none other than the Chinese, agents of the Chinese government. This investigation began once Donald Trump took over the presidency, so it was firmly his administration that is to thank for taking down this foreign spy. Before we begin the story, a quick word from my sponsor. The secret to becoming a millionaire can be summed up in two words, and I've heard this so many times: passive income. Dr. Barton Jr., who's now a self-made millionaire, used to have a 9-to-5 job, and he dreaded opening his mailbox because he knew that inside he'd find another credit card bill or a mortgage notice. But back then, that one paycheck every 2 weeks was barely enough to feed his family. Now today, he loves opening his mailbox because he knows he'll be greeted with an envelope that contains a big fat check with his name on it. And that check was earned without having to work your average 9-to-5. Even better, next day, he'll find another check with his name on it, and the day after that, and the day after that. Uncovering little-known alternative income streams was how he became a self-made millionaire. It changed his life and gave him complete financial freedom that we all strive for. Now, with the Federal Millionaire Guide, he's working to make this a reality for you as well. Over 100 government agencies are required by law to pay rent. The checks they write help create an $11.1 billion pool of money. And thanks to select private companies, it's very easy to become a part of it. And he'll show you how to get on that distribution list. You could be cashing checks of $1,795 a month starting next month. And those checks can grow by 2 times, 5 times, or even more over time. Please visit www.thefederalmillionaire.com and watch the free video to see how Dr. Barton and hundreds of thousands of other United States citizens are paying their bills with federal rent checks. Now, this former State Department employee, it was announced today, Wednesday, that she has pled guilty to conspiring to work with those foreign agents. Her name was Candace Marie Claiborne. She was arrested back in March of 2017, and she made her first court appearance that next day. Now, the DOJ said that she pled guilty to a charge of conspiracy to defraud the United States by lying to law enforcement and background investigators, and she had extensive contacts and gifts from agents of the People's Republic of China. And what she did in exchange for that was give them internal documents from the U.S. State Department. A real live traitor this woman was. Now, the DOJ had a lengthy statement. I'm going to be linking this article so you guys can go check it out yourself. Now, she just raked in the money and the gifts, and she gave them top secret information. She had a real security clearance. Now, she stated in her own journal that she could generate $20,000 a year by conspiring with these foreign agents of the Chinese government. Not only that, but she had a co-conspirator who she spoke with and portrayed these agents of the People's Republic of China as spies and willfully misled the State Department background investigators and FBI investigators regarding her contact with those spies. She also worked with her co-conspirators to delete evidence. Now, something about this really reminds me of Hillary Clinton. Currently, she's out on bail, but she is going to surrender, and she's going to be going to prison. Her sentencing has yet to come up. It'll be coming up later July 9th of this year, and she faces a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison for some of the charges, the obstructing an official, and then the maximum penalty for making false statements to the FBI is an additional 5 years. So she's looking at a potential 25 years in prison. I think because of her guilty plea, she probably will not face the maximum penalty, but I'm hoping that she was willing to give information on other people if she had it to give. Let's keep an eye on this one. Hopefully, this sends a strong message to people in the United States government that spying for foreign countries is not going to get you anywhere. Now, we've talked recently about the lawsuits that the Democrats are filing trying to get more information out of Donald Trump. Well, he's having none of it. He put them on notice. He says we are fighting all of the subpoenas. He had harsh words for the Democrats today. He gave a press conference, or at least answered some questions in front of the White House as he and Melania were leaving. One thing that the fake stream media doesn't like to talk about is the fact that Donald Trump is probably the most transparent president in U.S. history. He gives greater access to the press than any other president I've ever seen, and he's also been really good with giving information about himself and the things that he's doing. He's very, very transparent. He said, "The subpoenas are ridiculous. I have been the most transparent president and the administration in the history of our country by far. But we are fighting all the subpoenas because he knows that this is an invasion of privacy. It's disgusting the way the Democrats want to act." The president noted that Mueller most likely went through all of his taxes and his financial records, so the investigators have already looked at everything. And again, if there was anything to find, then they would have already done it because they went through his life, his records with a fine-tooth comb. Of course, we know that Jerry Nadler is planning to subpoena former White House counsel Don McGahn to testify publicly next month, and I'm sure that when that happens, they're not going to find anything new there either. But Nadler portrays McGahn as a critical witness to many of the alleged instances of obstruction of justice and other misconduct described in the special counsel's report, which, of course, actually denotes no instances of obstruction of justice or misconduct, because if it would have been in there, then Mueller would have found cause to actually name it. Unfortunately, all they do in the Mueller report is go through a list of things that are characterized to frame the president in a negative light, when we know that he's done absolutely nothing wrong. Now, Nadler is pushing back. He said the moment for the White House to assert some privilege to prevent this testimony from being heard has long since passed. I suspect that President Trump and his attorneys know that this to be true as a matter of law, and that this evening's reports, if accurate, represent one more act of obstruction by an administration desperate to prevent the public from talking about the president's behavior. The committee's subpoena stands. I look forward to Mr. McGahn's testimony. Now, there is absolutely every right the president has to claim executive privilege. But as I stated earlier, he is very transparent. He's very open. He wants to get this stuff over and done with. There is nothing for him to obstruct because he has done nothing wrong. And Nadler and the Democrats know it. And it's just another shameless grab to attempt to smear this president and try to tarnish all over his good name. And Rudy Giuliani has been doing a great job of drawing attention to actual obstruction and actual crimes. Right here, he said earlier, keep your eye on Ukraine. That's where a lot of dirty work was done. Now, we know that much of the Russian collusion hoax was born through agents of the Ukrainian government, and that work was actually done with people in the United States to work with the Ukrainians to smear people and to try to frame crimes as if it was the Russians and the Trump campaign, when actually it was the Hillary Clinton campaign, the State Department, and Ukrainian lawmakers. And there are charges pending in Ukraine against Ukrainian lawmakers who worked to subvert the U.S. election by attempting to get Hillary Clinton elected. Now, on Tuesday, guest reporter Colin McMahon wrote about the origins of that Trump-Russia collusion hoax with a Soros-funded Ukrainian activist group. Now, the affair began with documents released by groups that were funded by billionaire Soros, and now it's emerging that it's clear that under Barack Obama, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev worked very closely with Soros and his groups to compile opposition research on the Trump campaign and try to make sure that he would not be elected. Those law enforcement officials in Ukraine have tried to share that information on collusion between the Obama officials, the Clinton campaign, those Soros NGOs, and the Ukrainian government with our Justice Department, with the Trump's Justice Department, but so far it's been unsuccessful. Now, Deputy Head of the Prosecutor General's International Legal Cooperation Department of Konstantin Kulik, he told John Solomon, "We were supposed to share this information during a working trip to the United States. However, the U.S. ambassador blocked us from obtaining a visa. She didn't explicitly deny our visa, but also didn't give it to us. We spoke about this several weeks ago." And the Ukrainian official said they don't want to hand the evidence to the FBI because they don't believe that the FBI will actually pass it on to the people who will necessarily be able to do anything about it. On Wednesday morning today, Rudy Giuliani went on Fox and Friends to discuss these developments about the spying on the Trump campaign. He said, keep your eye on Ukraine. That's where a lot of the dirty work was done. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Rudy real quick and see what he had to say.
All those things have to be explored and more. And I ask you to keep your eye on Ukraine, because in Ukraine, a lot of the dirty work was done in digging up the information. American officials we used, Ukrainian officials we used, That's like collusion with the Ukrainians, and or actually in this case, conspiracy with the Ukrainians. I think it gets some interesting information about Joe Biden from Ukraine, about his son, Hunter Biden, about a company he was on the board of for years, dealings, which may be one of the most crooked companies in Ukraine, Ukrainian-Russian company.
Now, if you'll remember, Joe Biden intervened in the Ukraine and made sure that charges would not be brought, an investigation would not be made into his son's company. His son, as Rudy so succinctly puts, is a Ukrainian-Russian company. So it's not just Joe Biden or the Democrats colluding with the Ukrainians, conspiring with the Ukrainians. They also had something to do with the Russians. This is so clearly a classic case of projection. The Democrats, the enemies of the state here in America, they take what they've done and they project it onto their enemies, and they attempt to smear them with that information. This is a classic Alinsky tactic, and now we see it beginning to crumble. Now, not only do we have the story about Ukrainian conspiracy and collusion coming out, but Donald Trump himself is now talking about the fact that the UK helped the Obama administration spy on his campaign. We've been talking about this for over a year now. On Wednesday, President Trump tweeted out a stunning report by a former clown analyst, Larry Johnson, that was on OWN. And Johnson directly accused the UK of helping the Obama administration spy on President Trump in 2016. He said, former clown analyst Larry Johnson accuses UK intelligence of helping Obama administration spy on the 2016 Trump presidential campaign. Wow. It is now just a question of time before the truth comes out, and when it does, it will be a beauty. Let's go ahead and take a look at this report.
On this side of the ocean, who are at the highest levels in the U.S. intelligence community, as sort of an agreement to collect and share information and do it in a way that would not necessarily attract undue attention, but would provide a documentary record that could be then used to justify targeting Donald Trump.
Just as the Trump administration took office, a senior official in the Obama Pentagon had an unguarded moment on MSNBC.
I had a fear that somehow that information would disappear with the senior people who left. So it would be hidden away in the bureaucracy, that the Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods.
We know that specifically from a former Department of Defense official under Obama named Evelyn Farkas. She admitted to it.
Johnson said in the beginning the British were simply curious about Donald Trump as he became a serious candidate for president.
The British did this in part, I'm given to understand by people who were familiar with what was up, is that they were concerned about Trump's policies on NATO and Syria, and they wanted to make sure that they could start understanding what he was up to.
One clear example of the UK surveillance was the monitoring of Trump campaign volunteer George Papadopoulos, he said.
How did George Papadopoulos come to the attention of both law enforcement and intelligence sources? And when you look at his story, you begin to realize his first communications from UK to the United States, they were emails. So maybe, and one or two phone calls, if I recall correctly. Well, those were intercepted. Absolutely, they were intercepted by the United Kingdom through its General Communications Headquarters. And then information was passed back to the United States through intel channels.
In fact, Papadopoulos, living in London, was told in early March 2016 that he could focus on American relations with Russia. 1 week later, an American intel asset, Professor Joseph Mifsud, approached him in Italy. Later on in March, Mifsud met with Papadopoulos in London and told him that he could introduce him to Russian President Vladimir Putin. And the Russian collusion hoax was born.
Through the Five Eyes Agreement, the United States government under former President Barack Obama used that connection to begin spying on President Trump and people in his inner circle. This is clearly a foreign government conspiring to work with our government to take down a presidential candidate. Now, they may have just been interested, but I think they were hedging their bets. They wanted to make sure that if there was any way that they could help ensure the victory of Hillary Clinton, then they were going to do it. So they were more than happy to use their infiltrated spying network to set up people in the Trump campaign and thereby birth the Russian collusion conspiracy hoax. This is all coming out, as the president just said up here. Wow. It's only a matter of time, you guys. It is seriously coming to the surface. And people, when they realize, they ought to be outraged, because this cannot happen. We cannot live in a free and democratic republic if this is the way that business is going to be done. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do here in America. We've got a lot of cleaning up to do around the globe, and President Trump is draining the swamp. Now, on that note of President Trump, what he's doing, his mission to clean up not only America but the world, I found this thread here. Someone sent it to me in my Twitter messages today from T. Benjamin, one free inhabitant. And he's got some great theories. There's some things that I've talked about before, and there's some things I haven't talked about before. So we're going to go through it. So he titles it Trump, the greatest actor of all time, a hypothesis. Suppose for a moment that Storm Upon Us wasn't exactly right. In his superb video, Cue the Plan to Save the World, Joe says they, NSA plus goodies, asked Trump to run, which suggests that they asked him recently. Well, my hypothesis, he was groomed since birth to play this role. Suppose for a moment that this millennia-old cabal had such a tight grip on our reality that the few white hats in the know always knew the plan would take generations. Also, for this hypothesis to work, one must accept the idea that the alliance of white hats may not be so white, perhaps a murky beige with some dark stains on its collective fabric, or gray hats, as I like to say. After all, what if to defeat the cabal, one must have had to know it? Let's not forget that real Donald Trump graduated from a private military academy in New York and then on to Wharton. His father, Fred Trump, was a financier of the John Birch Society and a personal friend of Robert Welch. His uncle, John Trump, examined Tesla's work. Couple of scenarios here. A, the Trumps have Scottish or German nobility and thus were already connected to certain societies. Or B, they were the new money upstarts in New York and rubbed elbows with those who were. In either scenario, one thing is certain: consistency. If you watch closely, Donald Trump has been saying the same things since the beginning. It's uncanny how consistent his message and politics have remained. Let's go ahead and take a listen.
You are a mover, you are a doer. If you could make America perfect, how would you do it?
Well, I think that America is a country that has tremendous, tremendous potential. I think that much like the mind, I think that America is using very, very little of its potential. I feel that this country with the proper leadership can go on to become what it once was. And I hope, and certainly hope, that it does go on to be what it should be. When you get the respect of the other countries, then the other countries tend to do a little bit as you do, and you can create the right attitudes. The Iranian situation is a case in point. That this country sits back and allows a country such as Iran to hold our hostages, to my way of thinking, is a horror.
For some people, the ultimate goal in life has been becoming the President of the United States. Would you like to be the President of the United States?
I really don't believe I would run it, but I would like to see somebody as the President who could do the job, and there are very capable people in this country.
Most people who are capable are not running for office. Most men are frightened of politics today.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Yes.
It is a shame. The most capable people are not necessarily running for political office, and that is a very sad commentary on the country.
Why wouldn't you dedicate yourself to public service?
Because I think it's a very mean life. I would love, and I would dedicate my life to this country, but I see it as being a mean life, and I also see it as somebody with strong views, and somebody with the kind of views that are maybe a little bit unpopular, which may be right, but may be unpopular, wouldn't necessarily have a chance of getting elected against somebody with no great brain but a big smile. And that's a sad commentary for the political process. I mean, the Abraham Lincolns of the world. Abraham Lincoln would probably not be electable today because of television. He was not a handsome man, and he did not smile at all. He would not be considered to be a prime candidate for the presidency, and that's a shame, isn't it? The country, if we had the one man, and it's really not that big situation. You know, people say, well, what could anybody do as president? The one man could turn this country around. The one proper president could turn this country around. I firmly believe that.
Even back then, Donald Trump was looking to make America great again, and he was thinking about the Iranian problem. I contend that the Trumps were more of the upstarts in New York flavor, and thus had to learn to swim among sharks, equally comfortable dealing with politicians, bankers, and mobsters. But then I repeat myself. This is something I've definitely spoken on many times. When you start playing big boy commerce games, you better know your stuff, better know your law, better know your contracts, better know your trusts. Remember, Trump's father's close association with the John Birch Society? Think they know the law? Constitutionalists. Politico said Bircherism is making a resurgence, and a large number of political analysts from across the spectrum have argued that it shaped the modern conservative movement, and especially the Trump administration. Do you think Trump was raised in a household rampant with deep discussions in philosophy, freedom, and patriot talk? Want to know what patriot talk sounds like? That sounds like Donald Trump. The sound of Q. As they are one in the same person. By the time a young Donald Trump, drilled in Ivy League commercial warfare training, begins to form his first concepts of reality, this is the time he is also informed that what we perceive as reality is not how it really works. He is informed about the Cabal. But the Bircher influence was merely the foundation. It was what his uncle told him that etched his destiny in stone. Savior of the world. What did Uncle John tell young Donald? Uncle John told him of miraculous things that came from the mind of a miraculous man, a man who tamed electromagnetics and whose genius may be unparalleled to this day, Nikola Tesla. The public knows this to be a sad story, a genius who died penniless without a home or family. In his final days, Tesla certainly looked the part, yeah? Well, the Rothschilds ruined this man through their agent J.P. Morgan, or so they thought. Despite Tesla's immense gift to industry, first with Edison, then Westinghouse, then J.P. Morgan, they all used his innate kindness and then robbed him of his intellectual property. He still had friends, white hat friends, friends like John Trump. Why the heck would Tesla confide in John Trump? Easy. Electricity, specifically static electricity. This is the Van de Graaff generator from 1934. Remind you of anything? Wardenclyffe Tower. Did Tesla himself ever talk about Van de Graaff? Not only did he talk about Van de Graaff and his generator, but he was also bursting at the seams with excitement. He even wrote an article for Scientific American about it. So this man, Robert Jemison Van de Graaff, made Tesla's big vision a reality. Extreme high voltage with low amperes can deliver wireless electricity to every man, woman, and child on the planet. J.P. Morgan shut down Wardenclyffe when they realized Tesla's ultimate plan, free electricity. But we all know that J.P. Morgan only owned 19% of his company. Who owned the other 81%? These guys. Why was Tesla really shut down? You can't put a meter on free. So, what does this have to do with John Trump? Well, who was Van de Graaff's business partner? John Trump, that's who. And they formed the High Voltage Engineering Corporation. We'll check that one out in a minute. The very precursor to Space Force, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Back to the greatest acting job and subsequent sting in history. Interesting side note, HVEC wasn't formed until after Tesla died, 1946, which was 1 year before the official beginning of the Clowns in America, 1947. John, for decades, would be approached by people of all sorts because he could make megavolt beams of ions and electrons, death rays. What did he do with it? Cancer research, sterilizing sludge, wondrous things. He didn't touch the weapon stuff. What was Tesla working on in his final days? A way to prevent the dominance of any one nation over another using his technology. He knew this technology could be weaponized. He set out to devise a strategy that would prevent the use of his technology for nefarious means. Besides his own personal experience with bankers and patent theft, Tesla knew, through his network, of other threats to the safeguard of his technology. The Cabal already had plans. Here is where things get a little interesting. Some of the early white hat activities in this global spy game included other geniuses. Geniuses attract other geniuses, and sometimes those geniuses have money, lots and lots of money, and BALLS, and that's Howard Hughes right there. How do you go from the most eligible bachelor in the world one day to the most notorious hermit the next? What happens, no matter your wealth and status, when you go against the cabal? They try to take you out. Unfortunately for Howard and us, he knew too much. Remember, Hughes was the first a movie mogul, a playboy with extremely deep pockets. He'd collect aspiring debutantes by the dozen and have them shipped off for acting, singing, and dancing lessons. And he spied on all of them. He'd have them followed, phones tapped, and their boyfriends pre-approved. Hughes was a very envious and jealous man. He wasn't really trying to train these young actresses so much as he was trying to keep them for himself. He even had female spies for competition. And it was through one of his female spies that he was horrified to find out about the cult. Apparently, she'd gone to an event, the details of which made his stomach turn. Sacrifices in Hollywood, and thus began the highly irregular persona that we've come to know. Enough on Hughes for now. His future involvement with the clowns in America, Glomar, Explorer, RFK, and all clown satellites are worrisome. Did he know the clowns and FBI were infiltrated, i.e. deep state? We shall see. Back to Tesla and Trump. Keep this in mind. Tesla's papers are stored in government vaults for reasons of national security to this day. But where? Likely candidates would be the Research Center of Robert J. Oppenheimer, National Security Research Division of RAND. Buckle up, this is where the hypothesis gets fun. Do you know who these fellas are? How about these ladies? Do you know who they are? The name of the game here is energy. Original internal combustion engine was made to run on alcohol. Edison's deep cycle alkaline battery was shelved by his creditors. Waste product in the oil refinery is gasoline. Who funded Prohibition? The Rockefellers. Make sense now? If we had the technology to run automobiles on batteries 100 years ago, how many trillions dollars lost on gasoline, kerosene, and diesel sales? Want to know how long the Edison battery lasts? 100 years. 5 to 10 years for lead-acid batteries. Key points here. Number 1, the Rothschilds shut down Wardenclyffe because they could not meter it. Number 2, Wardenclyffe was not free energy, it was the distribution of it. Number 3, the Rockefellers shut down alcohol and electric batteries so they could profit. What would scare the heck out of them? How about an invention that would need neither gasoline nor batteries? Any ideas? Enter Exhibit A, the 1934 Pierce Arrow. Is it possible that Tesla discovered zero-point energy? Did he, as he was purported by his nephew, invent a gravitational energy converter? If you believe the first-hand testimony of his nephew, Tesla drove a converted car at speeds of up to 90 miles per hour, zero noise, for hours. Now, where were we? Oh yes, free energy. This is a huge jump from globalist bankers tending to their greed and control. This is paradigm shifting for all humanity. Properly utilized, nearly unlimited free energy could change everything. If we are to believe that Tesla demonstrated his device with his nephew in the car in 1934, it stands to reason that Tesla himself, a notorious promoter, would have said something about it. And boy, did he. Right here in 1933, 1 year earlier, he's talking about it. In fact, Tesla produced no less than 13 patents. Radiant energy from the ether and high-frequency energy, aka zero-point energy over unity. But then, right at the last minute, the patents stop. There is no patent from Tesla explicitly defining how it all pieces together. Since this hypothesis is based on the idea that Tesla did in fact solve the zero-point energy problem, how do we reconcile that in the last 100 years, nobody, to our public knowledge, has replicated, enhanced, or improved upon his scientific work? I mean, physics, right? What if free energy doesn't work from our current body of physics? What if our science is incomplete or even erroneous? Some key pieces of science would have to be missing. Big piece, small piece, how about the biggest piece of all? Relativity. We have a dilemma. Einstein's relativity work is a magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying errors. Its exponents are very brilliant men, but they are metaphysicists rather than scientists. This was a quote from Tesla in 1935. Now that's a problem. Can you imagine all of science going in one direction, perhaps the wrong direction? It certainly would not be the first time the cabal has backed and promoted junk science. If E equals mc squared is indeed incomplete or erroneous. Tesla's answer? Dynamic gravity. Now, the last part of the thread talks about the people who also completely dismissed Einstein's work, and that would have been Germany from the 1940s, if you get what I'm saying. Now, he continues, Tesla was funded by John Jacob Astor IV after J.P. Morgan killed Wardenclyffe. The same John Jacob Astor IV that died on the Titanic, the same banker that opposed the Fed. Now, don't be getting any strange ideas like Astor was a secret good guy. He wasn't. They were eugenicists like most of the elite at that time. In fact, the Astors were friends and longtime sponsors of this beauty, George Bernard Shaw. When Astor died, Tesla's fourth patron and the corresponding funds died with him. Edison, Westinghouse, Morgan, Astor. The man who brought us AC electricity, radio, wireless electricity was suddenly unsponsored? I don't buy it. And this is the basis of my hypothesis. After countless business disappointments and the discovery of the cabal via his own experiences, Tesla realized he was among monsters. Somewhere along the line, he realized he needed to go solo, or seek a secret sponsor. Tesla was driven into debt and reclusion. The media exposure was designed to crush his genius do-gooder, and boy did they. Not just the headlines, but the copy, using words like dreamer. It appears like there was an international assault on his ideas, reputation, and finances. Unvetted, but very recent news coming in to help fill the story, not vetted by me, but from a trusted source, Marine whistleblower and patriot. Let's jump to World War II. Perspective. Guess who was involved in the bad guy side of the deep state during and after World War II? That would be Richard M. Nixon. Well, maybe bad guy turned good, or another political player trying to save his own hide, the holder of the Keystone, or maybe just a good Navy man, always true to his country, but forced to deal with international power players for political survival and to hedge himself against blackmail. Nixon was shuffled through the Bureau of Aeronautics, where he served as an officer in the negotiation and termination of war contracts. Truth, legal naval officer in charge of the placement of Nazi scientists in Project Paperclip, allegedly. We all know that Nixon was a Rockefeller man. I mean, that's no secret, right? Any guess as to who calls the shots? Well, that'd be the money guy. Nixon was a Rockefeller man on the side of the espionage game. Their man on the ground, an agent. A Navy man who knew where all of the Nazi scientists were placed and into which black budget projects. He knew where the bodies were buried. That makes him controllable. It's not unheard of for a president to run alongside a controlled asset. Think Trump and Pence. Sometimes the asset does the controlling. Sometimes they are there lying in wait as a successor hedge should the president get too out of hand. Back to Nixon. Not only was he in charge of the legal side of Project Paperclip, but he knew which projects were sponsored by which families and where best to place them. Which project was of the greatest interest to those that would control? Die Glocke. That would be the bell, if you guys have ever heard of that. Certainly, Tesla wasn't the only one experimenting with high voltage. So were the best minds in that organization. But let's not pretend. The Nazis were merely the proxy for some very deep pockets, and those pockets were on both sides of the Atlantic. Right here, Prescott Bush. Strange, yeah? A war that was meant to happen, perhaps planned far in advance. Just how far back, I wonder? Albert Pike, if you guys know anything about him. And of course, I mean, how far back do you want to go? Go back far enough and you end up with the Canaanites, Babylonians, and the Pharaohs. Is that not the beginning of recorded history? All using conquest, subjugation, taxation, and knowledge as their weapons. Hidden knowledge. Magic. 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 And let's not pretend that behind the Canaanites, Babylonians, and the Pharaohs were always real people, real families, powerful families, families that know if they slip, they lose power, they lose control, inheritance. It's a vicious cycle. He who has the magic, he who has the technology. And what is the singular most desirable asset to control? More than money, more than title? What prevents us from regressing to a beast of burden, an existence based on subsistence farming, hunting, and gathering? You know, the real basics of survival. Energy. And the real granddaddy of them all, something for which they didn't have to pull it out of the ground or burn coal or nuclear reactors, would be what? It would be to pull that energy out of the air. Well, out of the ground to be precise. And I'm not talking about oil. I'm talking about scalar waves, extremely low frequency waves. The Earth has a frequency of 7.83 hertz, too low of a frequency to harness for practical use. That is, unless you know how to convert it. Convert it to what? High voltage current. The same stuff Tesla was trying to give away. Remember these guys? Guess what? They knew how. One of them has the last name of Trump. Guess who else knew? Of all people, Richard M. Nixon. Now, from the interview, did you catch that? As a hedge against the powers that be and former sponsors, Nixon played his trump card, i.e., if I am indicted for any of this stuff that you sponsored, I'll release your magic. Do you think his friendship with DJT was a coincidence? Let's go back in time a bit to the end of World War II. What's with all this military intel, specifically the Navy? Lots of interesting characters around this time, like this guy, James V. Forrestal. If you're into Roswell or Ancient Aliens or Hollow Earth or Antarctica, then you'll be quite familiar with Forrestal. I hold all of those things as possible, not probable. Instead, rather, I see a clear military intel need to obfuscate what was really happening. Well, who was Forrestal and why is it important? Because there is more than ample evidence that Forrestal was to be the first whistleblower on the deep state. His suicide fall from the 16th floor of Bethesda was murder, no doubt. What did he want to tell the American people? Okay, take another look at the man next to Forrestal in that tweet back there. That was Admiral Byrd, another Rockefeller man, but I suspect a true patriot. And here is a picture of Forrestal, and who is that in the back? That's a young JFK. There he is again, in the back, right there, JFK, at 28, viewing the offices of the former leader of Germany. This is after we had defeated Germany. They are touring the German government offices. There are many other white hats in our history. For now, we'll stick with Forrestal, Byrd, and Kennedy. Now, let me introduce you to some of the players on the other team. Not good people. Harry Truman, Allen Dulles, Stuart Symington. These three guys were a few of the key players for the Cabal. Their mission, or their orders, get the National Security Act into play at all costs, no matter what. What is the National Security Act? This act reshuffled nearly every branch of military from what it had been for 150 years to what it is today. It created the clowns, it created the DoD, it created the Air Force, it created the National Security Council, etc. Goodbye, Department of War. This was the final piece the Cabal needed, and it came right on time. It wasn't late, it wasn't early, it was just, well, next. You can't take over a nation overnight after all. I think it's pretty clear regarding Truman's loyalties. You can see right here. Despite the usual suspects, Illuminati, Jesuits, Zionists, Communists, let's not forget who our favorite Anon referenced in addition to some of the families named. The Roths, Soros, Saudi Arabia. He named the Nazis, the Fourth Reich, NWO. Remember, the Nazis were a proxy group funded by the real culprits. This man right here was a puppet, but he was also part of the Cabal. Who are the real Nazis? Well, let me be clear, it's not the Jewish people that are to blame, but the dark forces that hijacked their religion and identity, the same insidious group that has hijacked nearly every power center throughout history. And finally, we have President Trump and John Jr. So with regards to Antarctica, until the mid-1800s, were there any kind of deliberate expeditions? But things really started to pick up steam around the turn of the last century. About that time, Mr. Tesla was lighting light bulbs without wires in Colorado. Who would be interested in something like this? So dangerous, capsizing ships, freak storms, glacier dynamics. Who wants that? How about every entity with advanced technology? The inherent dangers of an Antarctic base were also excellent defensive advantages. Now, Admiral Byrd had a famous expedition to Antarctica. He had to return because they were decimated when they got down there, perhaps by some off-world entities, perhaps by a secret, undiscovered Nazi base built of people that had escaped from Germany at the end of the war and then built a base down there. But you can see Antarctica is huge. This is a definite strategic advantage to any nation that can control it, and that's why there are treaties to allow for all of the nations of the world to have bases down there. But there's a lot more going on here, and I think that this thread is right on with the way that he lines it all up. It's about power, it's about energy, it's about control of knowledge. And if the things that Tesla were working on were to get out, then it would upset the balance of power and knowledge and energy so greatly in this world that the Cabal would lose the grip that they've had on power for generations. This is why it is so difficult to drain the swamp, to really drain the swamp, because it is so far-reaching, because it goes back generation upon generation upon generation, and anytime you get someone who is willing to stand up against them, almost universally they are killed. Donald Trump is the last person in line who is ready to do what it takes, and he is absolutely doing what it takes, and it's why they are having such a hard time. They want to remove him so badly because he is about to upset the balance of power, not only in America, but across the globe. Finally, I will leave you with this. This is something that one of my followers sent me on Twitter the other day. It is something from a Masonic temple. As you can see, it has the title From Darkness to Light. I've talked many times about how our favorite Anon and the Whitehats are fond of using the tools of the Cabal against them. And I just wanted to point out that perhaps using the phrase from dark to light is another instance of doing exactly that. It's something that gives us hope. It's something that takes on a different meaning than when we say it than when the Cabal says it. But when they hear it, they instantly know exactly what it means to them, and perhaps they understand what it now means to us. I want to thank everyone so much for joining me today. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the Corruption Detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.